The year is 2026. The location is a microcenter in Fairfax, Virginia, or perhaps an Akihabara electronics stall in Tokyo, or maybe just a browser window open to newegg.com. The experience, however, is universal. It is a feeling of sticker shock so profound it borders on nausea. You are looking at a standard, unremarkable 32GB kit of DDR5 memory, the kind of component that, for the better part of 3 decades, was an afterthought in a system build. In 2024, this would have cost you the price of a nice dinner for 2. Today, in February 2026, the price tag sits at $429. For the first time in the history of the information age, the arrow of progress has reversed. For 50 years, the global semiconductor industry operated on a singular, almost religious promise that computing power would become cheaper, faster, and more abundant with every passing year. This was the edict of Moore's law, the economic gravity that allowed a college student to own a laptop more powerful than the supercomputers of the 1990s. But that trajectory has not just stalled, it has been violently altered. The global semiconductor landscape of 2026 is defined by a crushing new economic reality, the decoupling of consumer electronics affordability from the technological frontier. This market dislocation is not an accident of logistics. It is not a temporary disruption caused by a pandemic, a ship stuck in a canal, or a drought in Taiwan. It is the result of a structural phenomenon known as capacity cannibalization. The finite manufacturing resources of the world, specifically the clean rooms of Samsung, SK Hynix and Micron, have been reallocated. The consumer is no longer the customer. The artificial intelligence infrastructure is. The mechanism driving this is twofold. First, the production of high-bandwidth memory, HBM, consumes silicon wafer capacity at a ratio of 3:1 compared to standard RAM. Second, and perhaps more damaging, is the rise of Compute Express Link, CXL. Data centers are now buying massive amounts of standard DDR5 memory to use as expansion tiers for their servers. This means the enterprise is now outbidding you for HBM and the standard memory chips you need for your desktop. To make matters worse, this supply shock is colliding with an artificial demand shock of historic proportions. In October 2025, Microsoft officially ended support for Windows 10. In doing so, they rendered hundreds of millions of perfectly functional personal computers obsolete due to strict hardware security requirements, triggering a forced hardware refresh cycle that the market is physically incapable of supplying. This is the story of the convergence of 2 megatrends, the AI memory supercycle and the Windows 10 upgrade wall. This is the anatomy of the 2026 memory crisis. To understand how we arrived at this point of scarcity, we have to look at the bellwether event that signaled the end of the consumer era. It happened in December 2025 with a press release from Boise, Idaho. Micron Technology, the last American memory manufacturer and a company whose history is inextricably linked to the rise of the personal computer, made an announcement that would have been unthinkable just 2 years prior. They were discontinuing the Crucial consumer brand. For 30 years, Crucial was the blue-collar hero of the PC world. It was the brand you bought when you wanted to upgrade your Dell, build a gaming rig, or breathe new life into an aging Mac. It was reliable, everywhere, and cheap. But effective February 2026, Micron announced a strategic channel realignment, effectively exiting the mass-market DRAM retail space. The manufacturing lines that once churned out millions of plastic-shelled DIMM sticks for Best Buy shelves were severely throttled. The public justification was explicit. The company needed to pivot majority wafer starts toward high-margin data center products. While Crucial SSDs remained available, the memory sticks vanished from shelves, moving strictly to direct-to-enterprise allocation. This was not a bankruptcy. It was not a failure of the division. It was a ruthless, mathematically sound prioritization of capital. In the boardrooms of Boise, a wafer of silicon turned into HBM for an AI server was worth 5, 10, maybe 20 times more than that same wafer turned into DDR5 for a gamer. The Crucial exit served as a signal flare for the entire industry. It confirmed that the era of abundant, low-cost consumer memory had concluded. The pricing data from this period paints a stark picture of this structural shift. If we look at the market trajectory, we can see the exact moment the shortage transitioned from a fear to a reality. In July 2024, the memory market was actually in a glut. A standard 32GB kit of DDR5, 5200 memory could be purchased for approximately $85 to $95. Manufacturers were practically begging people to buy it. By January 2025, demand had normalized, and prices crept up to $110. But then, the HBM displacement began. By July 2025, as major fabrication facilities began taking lines offline to upgrade them for AI memory, prices hit $130. Then came the panic. In October 2025, following the leak of OpenAI's Stargate supercomputer requirements, the market realized there wasn't enough silicon to go around. Panic buying set in. Prices jumped to $220, and then came the Micron announcement. By February 2026, that same kit of RAM, which is physically identical to the one sold in 2024, commanded a retail price of $350 to $450, if you could find it. This represents a quadrupling of cost in under 6 months, a volatility index far exceeding the typical boom-bust cycles of the semiconductor industry. The underlying cause of this price explosion is a supply-side vacuum. The global capacity for DRAM production is finite. It is constrained by the physical square footage of clean rooms that cost billions of dollars to build and the availability of extreme ultraviolet (EUV) lithography machines that take months to assemble. When the major manufacturers pivoted to HBM, they didn't just add new capacity, they effectively deleted a substantial portion of the world's capacity to produce the commodity DDR5 chips used in laptops and desktops. This dynamic is exacerbated by the structure of the Western market itself. While China's Changshin Memory Technologies, CXMT, has aggressively expanded production of legacy DDR4 and entry-level DDR5 to insulate the domestic Chinese market, trade tariffs and security bans prevent this supply from alleviating the shortage in North America and Europe. For the Western consumer, the market remains a textbook oligopoly controlled by just 3 entities: Samsung, SK Hynix, and Micron. In late 2025, executives from all 3 companies confirmed what industry insiders had feared. Their HBM capacity was sold out for the entirety of 2026. This pre-selling of capacity effectively removed the price ceiling for the remaining supply. With their most lucrative product lines fully booked by hyperscalers, the voracious data giants like Microsoft, Google, and Meta, there was simply no economic incentive to maintain production levels for lower-margin consumer products. The result was a coordinated, though not necessarily collusive, shift away from the consumer. This left PC OEMs like Dell, HP, and Lenovo fighting for allocation in a starved market, forced to bid against each other for the scraps of silicon left on the table. To truly understand why a laptop in 2026 costs so much more than it did in 2023, one must understand the technological shift from standard double data rate (DDR) memory to high bandwidth memory (HBM). This is not merely a version upgrade, like going from an iPhone 15 to an iPhone 16. It is a change in the fundamental architecture of computing memory that alters the physics and economics of silicon wafer usage. Standard DDR5 memory, the kind found in your home PC, exists as flat, 2D chips. They are black rectangles soldered onto a green circuit board or a DIMM stick. They communicate with the processor through 2 independent 32-bit subchannels per module. While efficient for general computing, this planar layout is a bottleneck compared to AI-specific memory. It is a proven, reliable, and relatively simple technology to manufacture, but it lacks the massive parallelism required for neural networks. HBM, specifically the ubiquitous HBM3E and the emerging HBM4 standard, is a different beast entirely. It utilizes a 3D stacked architecture. Imagine a skyscraper. Instead of placing memory cells on a flat plane, HBM involves stacking 8, 12, or even 16 DRAM dies vertically on top of a logic-based die. These layers are interconnected not by wires on a board, but by through-silicon vias, TSVs. These are microscopic vertical tunnels etched directly through the silicon wafers themselves, filled with conductive metal to allow electricity to shoot vertically through the stack. The performance implication of this architecture is massive. A single HBM3E stack can deliver bandwidth in excess of 1.2 terabytes per second. In comparison, a standard DDR5 module struggles to reach 70 gigabytes per second. For AI training and inference, where models like GPT-5 require moving petabytes of data into the GPU instantly to prevent compute bottlenecks, a problem known as the memory wall, HBM is the only viable solution. You cannot train a frontier AI model on DDR5. It is physically impossible. But this performance comes at a terrible cost to the manufacturing ecosystem. This is the concept industry insiders call the wafer penalty, or the 3-to-1 rule. This rule dictates that producing 1 gigabyte of HBM capacity consumes approximately 3 times the silicon wafer capacity required to produce 1 gigabyte of standard DDR5. This inefficiency arises from 3 physical constraints. First, there is the die size penalty. HBM dies are physically larger than standard DRAM dies because they must accommodate the thousands of TSV interconnects and additional interface logic. You can simply fit fewer of them on a standard 300mm wafer. Second, there is yield loss. Stacking is exponentially more prone to defects. If a manufacturer stacks 12 dies to create an HBM cube, and a single die in the middle is defective, the entire stack may be rendered useless. While known good die, KGD testing helps mitigate this, the compound yield of a 12-layer stack is significantly lower than that of a single planar chip. Finally, there is process complexity. The manufacturing process for HBM involves additional time-consuming steps, such as TSV etching, wafer thinning, and complex packaging techniques like CoWoS, chip-on-wafer-on-substrate. These steps occupy fabrication tools for longer periods, reducing the overall throughput of the fab, measured in wafers per month, WPM. The math is inescapable. When Samsung or SK Hynix decides to reallocate 20,000 wafer starts per month from DDR5 to HBM, they do not get an equivalent amount of memory bits out the other side. They get roughly 1/3 the capacity. In a zero-sum manufacturing environment where building a new fab takes 3 to 5 years, this pivot creates an immediate, severe, and mathematically guaranteed supply shock for the product being displaced. That product is the memory in your computer. The strategic behavior of the big 3 memory manufacturers in 2025 and 2026 has been characterized by a unified flight to quality, specifically the high-margin quality of AI components. It is a gold rush, and everyone is selling shovels, abandoning the general store to do so. Micron technology acts as the bellwether for this trend. In fiscal year 2026, Micron raised its capital expenditure, CapEx, to $20 billion. This is a massive sum, larger than the GDP of many small nations, aimed almost exclusively at expanding HBM production facilities in Boise, Idaho, and Clay, New York. However, money is not magic. CapEx does not equal immediate supply. The lead time for these facilities, pouring concrete, installing clean rooms, calibrating EUV machines, means they will not relieve pressure until 2027 or 2028. To bridge this gap, Micron made a desperate move. In January 2026, they announced the accelerated activation of their Hiroshima and Taichung EUV fabrication lines, pulling the schedule forward by 2 quarters. This yield ramp surge was explicitly designed to bypass the traditional slow validation phase of greenfield projects. The move allowed Micron to deploy its 1-gamma process node on lines that had been pre-staged for 2027. Yet, even this aggressive expansion was insufficient to meet demand. Micron's CEO admitted in earnings calls that the company could only satisfy 50% to 60% of customer demand for HBM products. Then there is SK Hynix, the current king of HBM. SK Hynix entered 2026 holding a dominant 62% market share in the HBM space, largely due to its exclusive supplier relationship with Nvidia for the H100 and initial Blackwell GPUs. This dominance allowed SK Hynix to dictate pricing power that the memory industry had not seen in decades. However, their reliance on HBM is even more pronounced than Micron's. Reports indicate that SK Hynix has converted nearly 40% of its total DRAM wafer starts to HBM production. This massive reallocation is the primary driver of the sold-out narrative. SK Hynix is also spearheading the transition to HBM4. This standard introduces a paradigm shift. The bottom base die is no longer a simple memory controller produced in-house. It is a high-performance logic processor manufactured by TSMC on a 12-nanometer or 5-nanometer node. This creates a dual dependency. The memory requires SK Hynix's DRAM layers and TSMC's logic capacity. This integration blurs the line between memory and logic, further entrenching the product in the high-performance computing stack. Samsung Electronics, historically the volume leader in memory and the sleeping giant, found itself playing catch-up in the HBM race during 2024 and 2025 due to yield issues with its HBM3E validation for Nvidia. However, by 2026, the giant awoke. Samsung aggressively pivoted its Pyeongtaek P4 and P5 fabs toward HBM4 and HBM3E. This pivot involved repurposing vast sections of capacity that were previously dedicated to mobile, LPDDR, and PC memory. Samsung's entry into mass production of HBM4 in early 2026 did not alleviate the shortage as many hoped. Instead, it exacerbated the wafer penalty dynamic. As Samsung began sacrificing bit volume for HBM performance, the last bastion of high-volume commodity DRAM evaporated. While supply was contracting due to the physics of the 3-to-1 rule, demand was undergoing a vertical explosion driven by the industrial phase of artificial intelligence. If 2023 was about chatbots, 2026 is about infrastructure on a planetary scale. The single most disruptive force in the 2026 memory market is the Stargate supercomputer initiative, a joint project between Microsoft and OpenAI. When reports in late 2025 confirmed that OpenAI had secured preliminary agreements with Samsung and SK Hynix to ring-fence over 150,000 wafers per month, nearly 10% of the entire global supply, the industry gasped. To put this figure in context, global DRAM production capacity is approximately 2.25 million wafers per month. The rumored procurement for the upcoming Stargate project effectively signaled that the entire top tier of future global supply would be ring-fenced. This deal involves capacity reservation agreements, CRAs, effectively paying billions up front to book the factory floor space for 2027 and 2028. Microsoft and OpenAI bought the time of the machines, ensuring that when the fabs turn on, unlike oil, you cannot stockpile silicon for years. It becomes obsolete too fast. Instead, in 2026, the wafers coming out already have a destination, leaving the spot market empty. The Stargate project represents a monopsony effect, where a single buyer is large enough to distort the entire global market. By locking in supply through multi-year contracts, Microsoft and OpenAI ensured that spot market buyers, PC manufacturers like Dell and HP, and by extension you, were left fighting for the remaining capacity. And that remaining capacity was not just for PCs, it was also under siege from other hyperscalers like Google, Meta, and Amazon, all desperate to build their own Stargates. Driving this demand is the hardware itself, Nvidia's next-generation data center architecture, codenamed Vera Rubin. Set for limited release in late 2026, the R100 AI accelerator requires HBM4 memory with bandwidths exceeding 22 terabytes per second. Crucially, this architecture has been bifurcated. While the AI version launches on schedule, the consumer GeForce variant has been reportedly pushed to 2028. This leaves gamers stranded on the RTX 50 series platform for an extended multi-year cycle, further stagnating the consumer hardware market. This is the tyranny of the roadmap. The exponential growth in memory per GPU drives a linear increase in the number of HBM stacks required, which in turn drives a geometric increase in the wafer capacity needed to produce them. The industry's roadmap creates a forever shortage scenario where memory density requirements grow faster than fabrication capacity can expand. We are building the brains of gods using a supply chain designed for pocket calculators. The collision of supply contraction and demand shock has birthed Spec shrinkflation, a reversal of historical trends where new tech is now pricier, yet less capable. For the first time, your next computer may be objectively worse than your last. In 2026, The expected shift to 32 GB RAM has stalled. With DDR5 components now consuming 20% of a PC's bill of materials, BOM, manufacturers are cutting specifications to maintain price stability. New laptops increasingly feature soldered memory, killing upgradability. While critics allege planned obsolescence, this is largely a physics requirement. Local AI processors need bandwidth exceeding 100 GB per second, a speed standard slotted RAM cannot support. Smartphones face similar spec capping. Instead of the projected 24 GB, 2026 flagships like the Galaxy S26 and iPhone 17 are rumored to cap at 12 GB to offset rising costs. The era of the spec war is over. The era of spec preservation has begun. OEMs like Dell and Lenovo are caught in a vice, announcing 15 to 20% price hikes to pass through exploded costs. Gamers face a grim reality. Because GDDR7 video memory shares manufacturing tools with HBM, it has become the sacrificial lamb. Nvidia has reportedly slashed RTX 50 series production, creating a dual shortage where neither system RAM nor GPUs are readily available. This supply crisis collides with a massive forced demand event, the end of support for Windows 10. With Windows 11 requiring modern CPUs and TPM 2.0, approximately 240 million PCs are now effectively obsolete, generating a tsunami of e-waste. Businesses face a damned if you do, damned if you don't scenario. They must either replace hardware or pay punitive extended security update fees, $61 per commercial device. This forces IT departments into panic buying, further draining the limited memory supply and keeping prices elevated. Small businesses are trapped. They cannot afford the fees, yet the memory shortage makes replacement laptops unavailable or financially out of reach.